So now onto functions. You may have noticed the print statement I used earlier in the video. This is a function in itself. Lua provides you with a handful of functions that come with the language as part of what you'd call the standard library, which for the most part are utility functions that you will need when you're programming. Print, of course, is one of those, but we can define our own functions. So we can say local is equal to function, and functions start their own scope as well, which you have to close with an end value. And if this looks a little bit ugly to you, you can also do, these are accomplishing the same, but this is just syntax sugar to make it a little neater, more similar to what you'd see in another programming language, but like I said, same thing. So what are functions that useful for? Well, for one, it's used, like I said earlier, to encapsulate code that you would otherwise have to repeat in different places in your program. So instead of doing that, you could just put that code inside a function and then call the function like so somewhere else in your code. Once the function is defined, you just call it as such, the name with the two parentheses, just like that. Functions, however, have a couple other things going on, such as arguments. Well, arguments are a bit interesting. You can have as many arguments as you want, and they're separated by a space. And what these do is they allow you to pass in values to the function if you need to work with those values, or that you need to tell the function how, for instance, to accomplish the goal it's set out to do. You can pass in the argument to do it. And let me give this as an example. Let's say, no, actually we'll say print argument 1 plus argument 2 when we call func. So here we would say two arguments, two numbers, we'll say 6 and 7. And when we call func, it's going to print out the sum of those. We could also, instead of just printing out the value, we can return a value from a function using the return statement. And what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to capture in a variable or whatever else we may need, whatever value the function sends back. So we could say local result is equal to function of 6 and 7. Oops, I almost forgot. So then we'll just print result. And once again, it gives 13. You can, as a matter of fact, return multiple arguments, or return multiple values from a function in Lua. This differs heavily from most conventional programming languages in that you can only return one variable, and the variable also does have to be a specific type, but Lua does not have restrictions on types or anything like that. So for instance, we could instead just return argument 1 comma argument 2 to send both of them back. So then here we would have to just do local result comma result 2 equals function of 6 and 7. So if we print both of those out, you'll see it gives us 6 and 7 in the console. Or if we wanted to, we could just print result plus result 2, which gives us 13 once again. I don't remember if I said this earlier, but functions do have their own block, their own scope once they're open. The scope will start here and it will end here, so you can have your own local variables inside for anything you may need. The return statement will effectively close the function once it is called, so you cannot have anything happen after the return statement in that scope. So after this return, we wouldn't be able to put anything else unless it were inside of a scope of itself. So if we had, so if blah blah blah, so if blah blah blah, then return, and if blah 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 is some value that is true, then it's going to return these two values, and it's going to end the function right then and there. But if blah 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 does not happen to be whatever it is, then the function will keep running. For example, oh, you can see here I actually created an error myself. Attempt to perform arithmetic on local result a nil value. So you can see what happened is I did not return a result since it was wasn't that whatever. So result and result 2 were both still nil, and I tried to do math on a nil value, which you can't do. Louis will yell at you for that, as a matter of fact. You can't do math on any data type aside from numbers. Actually, no, you can do data math on strings. If the string is a number, then Lua will automatically convert the string into a number, and vice versa for some things. But I'm not going to go into that in too much detail right now. But what Lua won't complain about, however, is if you omit arguments to functions. So if we wanted to say, for example, maybe sometimes we didn't want to have to tell it what the second argument was, what we could do is we could just say argument 2 equals argument 2 or 0 as an example here. So what this is going to do basically is it's saying set argument 2 to argument 2 if it is true, like if it is a truthy value. So if it's not false or nil, then it's going to be argument 2. Otherwise, we'll just default back to 0 once again. So what this means is if we don't provide argument 2 down here, it's going to assume it to be 0 for us. Once again, we get nope, 0 down here, just as an example. But you can see Lua did not complain one bit.